I'm glad to be back again. It's been a few years, I think, but you've been supporting us since around '98, so we've got a long relationship, and we've appreciated all this time. Yeah, my wife is in California, in San Diego, and she's just started radiation this week. She had her third treatment today, and that's going okay. She'd been through 6 rounds of chemo and had a surgery, had to have a mastectomy, and so we appreciate your prayers for her. She's feeling pretty well right now, and the prognosis they think is pretty good, but she's got 5 weeks of radiation, and then we'll see where it goes from there. Yeah, the video, I was invited to be a camp speaker at Silver State Baptist Youth Camp this summer, and we were planning our regular furlough for next year, but First Baptist in Inglewood, Colorado invited us to come. They were paying all our expenses to come for the camp and then send us back. But then my wife's cancer, we discovered in last December, and so we were unable to do that. I went ahead and fulfilled the camp thing this summer while she's in San Diego, and I just came from there last week. I've been over there for a few weeks, and now I've got meetings coming up. So appreciate your prayers for her. She's been through the ringer with all this, and she's been quite discouraged, and I especially appreciate your prayers for her. She wants to go back to the Philippines. And we've necessarily made this our furlough now because we're going to be here the whole time. And but next summer, if she's well, we're going back. And so pray for her, and we appreciate that. So for the camp this summer, since they were all young people, and I didn't know any of them, most of them didn't know me. And so I spliced together all our old furlough videos so I could tell the story, because I was the camp mission speaker, so I wanted them to know the story. And so that's what I've got tonight. And I had to do it on my laptop, which wasn't the best situation, so some of the splices aren't quite perfect, you know, that kind of thing. But I hope you'll appreciate it or enjoy it. And then when it's done, it's going to tell the whole story, so you won't miss out. Now you'll know everything. But anyway, but we'll do that, and then I'll come back and speak some.
In February 1999, Leah, Jonathan, and I left the United States, not quite in this fashion, for the mission field.
The Philippines is an archipelago of 7,107 islands, covered with thick, lush jungles and magnificent mountains. It was here on the Bataan Peninsula that MacArthur's forces opposed the Japanese in 1941, and where the Bataan Death March began. A short bonker ride across the straits is the island of Corregidor, where MacArthur famously said, "I shall return." I first came to the Philippines in 1985 as a Navy pilot assigned to Subic Bay near Longo City. June 15, 1991, Mount Pinatubo, 20 miles north of us, blew its top 90,000 feet in the air and buried entire villages and towns, leaving 100,000 homeless refugees. Leah and I started a ministry to the refugees in this camp, and then introduced ourselves to a small village of Aita people in the jungle near our home. Their leader was Fletcher Abraham, the man in the blue shirt. We held Sunday school, and several of the children were saved, as well as some of the adults. But Fletcher resisted. "I have never sinned," he said.
When I got out of the Navy, the Lord called us first to the land of Kenya.
So there's Impala there. There's Impala there!
Oh. Yeah. In January 2000, I took over the Nairobi Baptist Bible College when Richard and Ann Connerup went on furlough, and then administrated the school for 11 years. We also started two churches during that time. Other areas of ministry we were involved in included Awana programs for children in the slums and outdoor preaching. Awana, come on down. Come on. Awana, come on. Come on. We returned to Kenya in 2004 to our work at Kihunguro Bible Baptist Church. The church was doing well, averaging 180 in attendance. We started an Awana program for the children. In 2009, we started a church in the Tasia coffee plantation for the plantation workers. And where Ethan was born. He's resting so peaceful. Then when Leia's health broke down, we felt the Lord leading us back to the Philippines, where she made a full recovery. The Philippines has an abundance of tropical fruit, rice, and fish. Mass transit is the world's best. Jeepneys and tricycles will take you right to your door. The culture is a mixture of the primitive and the ultra-modern. Here's how you fix your electrical problems. 80% of the country is enslaved to the penitent works of Catholicism and the worship of Mary. Immorality abounds. In 2014, a transgender hooker picked up a U.S. Marine in this bar and was found dead the next morning in this hotel, a block away from our church. We arrived in 2013 just in time for the worst typhoon in Longapo history. In the center of town, the water was 8 feet deep. We accepted a call to First Longapo Fundamental Baptist Church while we trained a young man to become the permanent pastor. Okay, we made it to the top. Now we gotta go down here a ways, and the place where we're going is back down the hill. A little ways, but there's a 216 steps, and the steps are about 18 inches high on average. Anyway, we'll have Bible club here in a few minutes. We hold our baptismal services at the beach. When I baptized Ethan in 2016, I was blessed to have baptized all of my children. In 2014, we found the Aita village at Pastolan in the mountains up this rugged road and across this rickety bridge. The people are in great poverty and have many medical needs. We talked with some of the tribal council about our plans, and then we met two of our Sunday school children from 92, Marilyn and Sunny, and one of the adults, Nanita, and Bonnie, who had been a Marine guide. And then we found Fletcher. He greeted me like an old friend and agreed to have a Bible study at his house. There were 12 at the first study, and Fletcher accepted the Lord. I had prayed for him for 22 years. The Bible study grew, and soon we were building our first meeting place at the top of the mountain. And then the ministry began to branch out. We had been praying for land to build on, and this plot at the top of the mountain was offered for our use by Marilyn Castro, the woman in the red shirt, and her husband Rome. Since we cannot own Aita land, it had to be donated. We met first with the village chieftain, Condrado Fernillian, and then with the tribal council, who all approved. But before we could build, we had to get permission from the forestry department to cut down 6 trees. In April, we reserved a pavilion by the river and held a vacation Bible school. Workers from the church in Longapo helped us again. 66 children, teens, and even adults attended, and 46 were saved. They also led these 3 ladies to the Lord after one of the Bible studies. Finally, we received permission from the forestry department, and we cleared the underbrush, cut down the trees, and had them sliced into benches. The COVID pandemic slowed down the work, but we still managed to get the auditorium built in 2021. Our Sunday school was still held outside under a pavilion in the trees, but finally, we got permission to remove more trees. First, we built restrooms and then the youth wing. This has enabled us to hold many more programs for the youth, as well as to feed the people after every program and every service. This was our 10th anniversary service in 2024. We hold Aita baptisms at the river 3 kilometers away. These are the people your support is helping us to reach with the gospel. When we return, we need to purchase a chainsaw to clear stumps, build a storage shed and a baptistry, and eventually a 3rd classroom parsonage building. But our biggest need is for more laborers. Would you pray and ask the Lord how you can help? This is why we go. The penitent works of Catholicism offers the Aita people no hope. The glorious gospel of Christ does. It's been a hard term for Lay. In 2023, she was broadsided. and spent 4 days in the hospital. And now she has breast cancer, which has forced us to come home. Pastor June and Ezra DeKenya have taken over the work while we are gone. Please pray for them and for Leigh's recovery so that we can get back to the Aita people as soon as she is well.
Thank you. That's the end of it. One of the problems I had putting it together was I couldn't get the music to stop at the end when it faded out. So when it fades out, that's it. Anyway, the night, what'd you call them? Night lights. What a blessing that is, and I hope you'll appreciate them and what they're supporting. You saw Ethan was born in Kenya. My wife had a very difficult pregnancy. In fact, about 6 or 8 weeks along, she had hemorrhaged, and we took her to the emergency room in Nairobi, and the emergency room doctor there said the pregnancy's over. I thought when I went home I was going to find the remains in the blood or something on the floor. But I went to check her in, and when I came back, he said, what we're going to do now is a DNC procedure. Now, I have supported National Right to Life since 35 years ago or something, and they had a newspaper, and I learned a lot about abortion by reading their newspapers, and one of those things was I knew what a DNC procedure was. And as soon as the doctor said that, that triggered to me that this isn't over yet, the baby's still in there. And so I asked him, and he said, well, it can't survive. And I said, we're not doing anything till our gynecologist gets here and we have an ultrasound. And we had to wait 4 hours in the middle of the night, and we had to wait 4 hours, but he came, we finally had the ultrasound, and the little baby was about as big as my thumbnail, and the heart was beating, and everything was fine. And she went through a very difficult pregnancy on bed rest the whole time, but Ethan was born, and he's the joy of our getting older life, and he's a wonderful young man. I know there's been a lot said about Charlie Kirk and all this. I don't want to belabor this point, but last week when it happened, we used to watch him a lot, and my sons and I. But the day it happened, Ethan was just distraught. He was crying. He could not be stopped. We brought him home all day for 3 days. It seemed like he wouldn't stop crying. And Friday, he actually saw his Bible teacher. He's attending Christian Unified Schools in San Diego. That's the David Jeremiah School. And he had his Bible teacher is a Bob Jones graduate like I am, and he is a very good man. And my son Ethan actually did some counseling with him. But he finally told me when they were in that accident, when they got knocked over, of course, he was on the right side, and when the car went over like this, he's looking right at his mother right there, and she hit her head on the windshield, and he saw it, and blood is everywhere, and he literally thought she was dead. And he said the reason it hurt him so bad. When we saw that video when Charlie Kirk is hit and his arm goes up like this and freezes and he slides over, he said when her head hit the window, her arms went up like this and just froze, and then until she slumped down, and he had to get out of the seatbelt and everything else. But he said every time he saw that video, and it reminded him of that, and so he was just totally heartbroken. But you know, the blessing of it is, he said to me Friday before I left to come back to Springfield where our home is, and then come over here. But he said to me, he asked me if I would give him information on soul winning, because of course when at the college I used to teach evangelism, and I've preached it at our church, and I've taught it to the Aitas, and he's heard it before, but he said, I want to have the material so I can learn it and memorize it so I can tell people about Christ. And you know, when your family goes through trials like that and difficulties like that, and they come out with that attitude, I want to be a part of it, I want to do something, I want to win people to Christ. What a blessing, and how I'm just overwhelmed. And I hope that he carries through and continues with that burden. I'd like you to look at Matthew chapter 9 and verse 36 to 38. And here, Matthew chapter 9, verse 36. Jesus has been teaching the disciples, and they've been going around to the villages and the synagogues and all that. And in verse 36 it says, but when he saw the multitudes, he was moved with compassion on them, because they fainted and were scattered abroad as sheep having no shepherd. And then saith he unto his disciples, the harvest truly is plenteous, but the laborers are few. Pray ye therefore the Lord of the harvest, that he'll send forth laborers into his harvest. Now, compassion is a fundamental trait or a principle of the Christian life. The second great commandment, Jesus said in Matthew 22:37, is that we're to love our neighbor as ourselves. And then he teaches us in the parable of the Good Samaritan that our neighbor is everyone. Not whether they're next door or around the world, that's our neighbor. And we need to get the gospel to them. And it's more than seeing a commercial on TV about starving children in Africa and feeling sympathy for them. David Jeremiah said this, sympathy is something you feel. Compassion is something you do. Compassion is acting upon the feeling. Compassion is being doers of the word and not hearers only, James 1:22. And so the work of missions, it all begins with compassion. Now our situation, of course you're aware now, but last December, Leia's whole side was swollen. And we went to the doctor and they did an ultrasound and he said, we've got a problem. And they wanted to do a mastectomy in order to do biopsy and all of that. And we said, well, that's a little much before you even know what it is, isn't it? And they said, well, that's all we can do. And so we decided we'd come home to the States, and he said, well, that would be better because you'll get better treatment here. And so we sent Leia to San Diego because her mother, her sister, our daughter lived there, and they took her straight to Sharps Medical Center in Chula Vista, where my mother-in-law is also being treated for cancer. And they went straight to the emergency room rather than trying to find a doctor to get an appointment 2 months later, because they couldn't wait. And there happened to be an oncologist. Now, this is how the Lord works things out. There happened to be an oncologist in the emergency room that evening when they got there, and it was full of people. There had 100 or more people in there, and they'd have been there all night waiting. But the oncologist said, "Put her first." And so she went in and saw her, and she said, "Okay, you have a problem, and we've got to deal with it." But the first time they could get in for a PET scan and ultrasound and all that stuff was February 17th. And this was January 15 or 16. And so they scheduled it. But then a week later, they got a call from the doctor saying, come in on February 4th, which was the Martin Luther King holiday. And they had called all the lab people, and the technicians and everybody came in on the holiday just to treat Leigh. And so that was a blessing from God. And so they did it all, and they found she had a tumor that was 5 centimeters, and that's pretty large. And she had some on her lymph nodes. And so they immediately got her into chemo. She had her 6 treatments. And we got home. Ethan and I stayed in the Philippines so he could finish his junior year of high school. And as soon as he was done, we came home. And we got there in time for her last chemo treatment. And then I went on to the camp. Well, on July 7th, she had a surgery. And when they went in, the x-rays and all whatever they did, it indicated that the tumors had actually shrunk down to nothing. But they found a whole lot in there, and so they wound up doing a radical mastectomy anyway. And but they took out 24 lymph nodes as well, and 6 of them had cancer. So they wanted to do radiation. Her problem was she couldn't lift her arm more than this. So she'd been going through physical therapy so she could get it up like this so they could do the slider into the machine and do all the radiation marks where they need to do it. And so that started Monday. She had her third one today. And so everything looks well at the moment. We appreciate your prayers. Just like I said earlier, she's quite discouraged, so just pray for her. Now the Aita, of course, you see from the video the poor condition they live in, and we met them back in '92 after the volcano had erupted, and that's where we started. And then our story took us to Kenya and back to the Philippines, and we've got the work started there. Lay studied nursing before our first son was born, and so she never finished it, but because he was born. But then it became handy because she's got a good memory. She remembers a lot of things. She knew how to draw blood and give shots, which she doesn't have to do there. But she knew a lot of things about medicine, about treating different diseases and things, and what kind of medicine and ointments and all that to use. And so our medical clinic started because there were so many sick people and people with problems, but most of it was pretty simple. And then the reason was because they don't have running water in their homes. The government had built a water tank up there, and there's a line that runs down the road, but they have to go out to the road with a bucket to fill up water. And so they don't have toilets in their homes. They just go out in the jungle and things like that. And basically, they're just dirty. And I mean, not to be cruel, it's just the fact of life. But they go down to a river to bathe, and it's about almost 2 miles away, and it's the cleanest water around there. They go down there to bathe, but by the time they hike back up to the village on a dusty trail and all that, they're almost as dirty when they get back as when they left. And one of the problems then also is lice. We found that by treating all these children, and the ladies and the children, they just love Mom Lay, and so whenever she's treating them, doing something, they give her a big hug. Well, they almost all have lice, and every time we come home, lice, you give a hug, and the lice goes from here to here, and so every time we come home, we're brushing out her hair and washing with an anti-lice shampoo and all that. Well, we in order to build the building up at the top of the mountain, then when we finally got the permission for all that, we had to have water. And in order to get water, we went searching. We had people looking for us, and we're up on the hillside. The village is on the side of the hill, and we're right at the top. We've got the prime spot in the whole village because the road came up to here. Since we started, they built the road down the backside, so there's one road that goes through. And if you go through the village, you go by our church. You can't miss it. And so it's a perfect location. But we had to get water up there for cement and all that to build. So we were out searching. Well, the valley goes behind us, and up on the next ridge, we found a spring. And so we went up there, built a casement around it, ran a pipe all the way across the valley, about a half a mile, and then buried it all and got it up there and put a water tank. And so we've got water. So once we had the water and we're able to put the buildings up, now we bring shampoo. And every Sunday when there's kids with lice problems, they're out there washing their hair. And so we've been doing that, trying to help everybody keep them as clean as they can. And the medical needs, meeting that is a way of helping. You know that when Jesus had compassion on people, he didn't just look and say and have sympathy. He did something. And of course, the Lord could do anything, and he would heal the sick and the blind and the lame, and raise the dead and all of those things. And so we began using this medical clinic as a way of trying to reach people. And so a lot of people have come and just come to see the medical clinic, and then they hear the gospel, they get saved, they start coming to the church. And there was a man that had, they all wear flip-flops, basically like we wear tennis shoes, and he was on a motorcycle, and somehow the chain grabbed his right heel and ripped it all open, and it was infected and bad, and it got all swollen and big and black and dirty, and they went to the hospital, and they wanted to amputate his foot. Well, they didn't want to do that, so they came to see us, and Leigh said, well, let's see what we can do. So we got him on a table, stretched his leg out, washed it all off, and what we found was all the black on his foot was just greasy dirt. and washed it all off, and of course it was terribly infected, so Lay cut into it as much as she could, as gently as she could, as much as the guy could stand, and cleaned out as much infection as she could, and then peroxide and all that, and ointment, and wrapped it up and said, come back next week. And so he came back a week later to change the bandage, and sure enough, his foot was healing. So my wife had saved his foot. And then, of course, she gave them the gospel, and the man and his wife accepted the Lord. And so their souls were saved as well. We noticed one time that Fletcher, the little man who was the key to the whole ministry, he was squinting, and I asked him, are you having a hard time seeing? Yeah, and we had an eye doctor in our church down in Longapole where I was pastoring, and so we took him there and found out he had cataract. So at the church, the head deacon was a businessman, and he was the chairman or president of the Lions Club that year, and the Businessman Association. And I asked him, do you know where we can go to get cataract surgery? And he said, oh, well, we're sponsoring a free cataract clinic for indigenous people next week. And so they had doctors coming from the States and all of this. And so we got Fletcher down there and took him in there, and they saw him. Okay, and they explained what's going to happen. And he goes, oh, he got scared. He said, no, I don't need that. I'll be fine. And they couldn't convince him. And they called me in to talk to him. And I said, look, you're going to be blind. You have to do this. No, I'll be fine. No, I said, look, what if we just do one eye now, and when it's done and you see how good it is, then we'll do the other eye the next time, because they were planning to come back in 6 months. And so he finally agreed to that. And so the day of the surgery came, and we brought him, his son Elvin came with us, and when they took him in, Elvin started crying, and we said, well, what's the matter? And he said, are they going to remove his eye? We're that, oh. You know, no wonder. No matter how they explained it, they didn't understand, this is what they thought was going to happen. And so, but we got his surgery done, had a patch on the eye, took him back up to the village. Nobody had ever had cataract surgery. And everybody came around to see him. And a few days later, we took him back, got the patch off the eye, and he goes, oh, can I do the other one now? So, well, you have to wait 6 months. But 6 months later, we had 8 more patients. And so, because a lot of people up there, for whatever reason, were having cataract. So we brought them all down, and then they came a third time, and we had 7 more. So we had 16 people total that had cataract surgeries done. And before it was over, all 16 of them came to the church and were saved. And so God used that to reach people in ways that, we might not have been able to otherwise. And of course, we have a lot of funerals. You saw the one clip there on a video towards the end. That was a burial, and all the people were wailing and crying. And the woman's name was Milagros, and she was one of our members. She had been saved, but she was very popular in the village. And there's a lot of people that aren't saved, don't come to the church yet, and we're hoping to win them, of course. But there were a lot of people came to that funeral. And that's why they were moaning and wailing, because a lot of them didn't know the gospel. But I did the funeral service, and then we did a burial service right there. And when they all stopped crying and wailing, I was able to share the gospel with them one last time. But when we have funerals, they usually have a wake, and it'll last 5 days or something. And then normally on Saturday, they'll do the burial. But every night of the week when they're having their wake, everybody comes around, they put out tables and everything else. The local barangay, precinct captain in the next town, they provide all these accoutrements for the funeral. They provide the casket and a canvas and chairs and tables and all that stuff. And for the people, they come around, they sit around all night and gamble. And so we started, when some of our people were passing away, we asked them, hey, you want us to do a service for you? Oh, yeah, they'd never had a service. They just go gamble till they bury them and make a lot of noise. And so so we started having a service. And some of them have a service every night. Some of them just Friday before the burial, and it's fine, however they want to do it. But we go and preach, and we've had people get saved that way. But we notice that when we're preaching, all the gambling stops. And they're very polite, and until we finish the service, and then they break out the gambling and start again. One time we were there at one funeral, and we were done, and we were just sitting around talking, and I noticed that nobody was gambling, and I thought, hey, this is great. Maybe we're getting through to the people. And but so I said something to one of the relatives, and she said, no, they're just waiting for you to leave. So we decided to stay longer. But Milagros had two nieces, Geraldine and Mylene. And Geraldine had come to the church last December, and she got saved. And Mylene didn't live in the village. She lived outside, but she came for the funeral, of course, and she was there at the burial and heard my my last remarks there at the internment. And she said to me, I'd like to hear your Mass. And I said, well, we don't do a Mass. 80% of the Philippines is Catholic, so that's what people know. But I said, we don't do a Mass, but I can tell you what we preach from the gospel. And so she came, and we went back up to the house. They were feeding everybody. And while we sat out there, while they were eating, I shared the gospel with her, and Mylene accepted the Lord as well. And so all of these are areas where the Lord has used us to reach people for Christ. We've been praying for someone who could come and work with us full time. Now, we have some people helping us teaching. One of them is Leia's cousin. She has a teaching degree. One of them is a woman named Sheila, who is she started a Christian school right in the Longapo area. She's a teacher, and she comes, and they both help us with the children. And but they're there most of the time. But we haven't had someone steady to help us with the youth. And so we've been praying for someone who would come. Well, then Leia had to come home, and now I'm doing all the messages on my own. Sometimes I use her to translate, but now I'm translating everything and writing out the messages and all that, and it's a very slow, tedious process. But we were looking for someone who could come and preach, and a Filipino couple. And we had a couple there, June and Ezra Daquina, you saw on the video, and they were interested. They were working in an orphanage. She's also a teacher, and they're younger, and they came and visited the church a couple of times. He preached for us, and we asked them pray about coming to work with us. And in April, they said, we've decided to come work with you. And we're to praise the Lord just in time. They're going to come. And then in May, they moved up, and we established them in the church. The people love them, accepted them. They have gone whole hog on this whole thing. I mean, the youth department has doubled. They've had 24 people saved this summer. They're preparing for a baptismal service down at the river. And things are going really well with them. We are just as happy as we can be how things are. Well, there are outside influences that come, and materialism. The one thing about it, when they built that road through there, outsiders came in, all kinds of stuff that the people hadn't had before are coming into the village, and the young people especially are grabbed by materialism and taken away. And we've seen a lot of our young people just go away, and it's a sad thing. But there's other problems. Our church there has the problems just like people have everywhere, I guess. But one of the problems was that two ladies had a dispute over water. And these were the two of the most important people, Eileen and Marlon, the two most important women in the development and the building of our church, and they've helped us with the tribal council and all these things, and all of a sudden they're fighting each other. And it was just very discouraging to see right before we're getting ready to leave. And so the last Sunday I was there, I preached on Psalm 133:1. Behold, how good and how pleasant it is for brethren to dwell together in unity. And I don't know, the Lord worked it out, because I don't know how I stumbled through the Tagalog well enough, but there were so many teary eyes in the auditorium when I gave the invitation. And these two ladies, Eileen and Marlon, the tears flowing down their faces, they met each other in the aisle, shook hands and hugged and started talking. And we're just hoping and praying that this goes through and that they've ended this feud and that they'll be back together, working together again. Because both of them have been key people. They've gone on visitation. They've invited people, and they're important to us. But we're glad to see that. Irene's daughter Eloisa she grew up with us since the time she was 7 years old, and she'd been one of the most faithful teens, and she'd been involved and a leader in everything with the youth. And all of a sudden, a year and a half ago, 2 years ago, she brought this girl named Princess with her. And Princess was very shy and kind of backwards, but Princess got saved and began to grow and has really become a special blessing to us. But Eloisa suddenly dropped out. And we were wondering what happened to her, and her mother told us she'd gotten a boyfriend who belonged to Iglesia Ni Cristo. Iglesia Ni Cristo is a Philippine cult like Jehovah's Witness. And I've preached about them. I've warned the people about those groups. They come up there from time to time trying to take people away and all that. And they don't have a work up there. The people don't like them generally. And we couldn't figure out why this is going on, but we were concerned. We prayed about it. And it took several weeks, but she finally broke off with him. So we were happy, but it's taken almost a year for her to get back in church and get faithful. But I saw her on visitation one day. I passed her on the street, and I said, "Hey, we sure want to see you. This is our last Sunday here in May." And so she said, "I'll be there." And she came, and after the service, when her mother and Marlon were crying and hugging, she came forward, and she was crying, and she said, "I'm sorry that I haven't been faithful. I'm going to come back and be faithful." And this summer, now with Ezra and June and Ezra that are there, Ezra has been working with Eloisa and bringing her and training her. And last Sunday, she taught Sunday school for the first time. And Princess, she has grown to the point where we sent her to the Baptist Bible Seminary and Institute in Manila this fall for school. She's our first Aita student to go to Bible school. And so pray for her. Princess is her name. Eloisa, maybe she'll go next year if she keeps this up. We're praying for her. We've got 3 young men, Dominic, Tennille, and Jeff. All 3 have said, we want to be preachers, and we're planning to send them to the seminary, 2 of them next year because they're seniors now, but 2 of them next year and the other one next year. And we're hoping that they'll all stick with it because we've got some fine young people. And there are 11,000 Aitas scattered across the mountains on northern Bataan. We've been to 3 villages, but there are so many of them in small groups everywhere, and we can't reach everyone. The more Aita young people we get trained to go out and do it, the more people we'll be able to reach. And so we're hoping that they'll stick with it, and we're just blessed to see how that God has worked in the people's lives. One of the things that we'd like to do is over the next 2 or 3 years anyway, it only costs $50 a month to send these kids to the seminary. And so we'd like to raise a scholarship. If we could get $2,000, $3,000, $4,000, we could send a whole bunch of kids over there at $50 a month. That is a bargain price, and we'll have them. And we also, for June, they have to take tricycle up to the village and stuff like that. They borrow my car sometimes, but it's a big MUX Isuzu thing, and they're small, and he doesn't like driving it. So they take a tricycle up there. If we could get him a motorcycle, that would really enhance their ability to get up to the village and do visitation and all that. That's about $2,500. And then parsonage. We're looking forward to, in the future, if they want to stay up there, we'd like to have a parsonage so they could stay there full time, and they're talking about it. They just want to move there and work there. And so we're really happy for all that. Well, we keep getting messages from people saying, please come back, and we're planning on it. When we left, people were crying, and I told them, we'll be back if Lord willing, and I mentioned something to Irene, and she said, the reason they're crying is because there are many people that come to Pastolan, the name of the village. She said, you're the only ones that stayed, and they don't want us to leave, and we don't either if we can go back. So pray, I hope that pray for my wife that the Lord will in His grace will heal her and we'll be able to go back again the next year. But what about you? Is God working in your heart about missions? Young people, even old people. You know what? I was 42 when I went to the mission field. And so you don't have to be young. God calls all kinds of people. But are you willing to go? Because the need is great. You see things going on in the world today. You know we're in the last days. And we don't know when the Lord's coming. Could be sooner or later. But people need the Lord. As we sang the song earlier, now some can go and some can give, but all can pray. And I hope that you'll pray for us, for these other missionaries here, and for others that you support. It starts with seeing the need and being moved with compassion. Are you moved with compassion? Will you pray with me, please? Father, we're thankful